Alright, in this demo I want to show you how you can save out some pictures before we start talking about the CSS. So the first picture that's the furthest most back in the layers would be the one that is set up for the HTML. And that's the picture of the airplane in the sky. And I was able to get that downloaded from morguefile.com. There are lots of different websites where you can do similar kinds of things, but Morguefile is a nice one because people will upload their images and allow you to use them a lot of times for free, but you would have to look at their rights and the terms of use. So if you do a search, let's say for textures, it'll go ahead and it'll pull up a whole bunch of different things. I specifically in this case was looking for something with an airplane, so you could figure out what kind of background image you wanted to use. The thing that's nice about this website is that it's a lot of free to use stuff, and it's also really high resolution typically. So you want to look at, whenever you download the highest resolution, look at the image information whenever you download it, and the best way to do that is in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and look at Photoshop. And I'll open this, and I'm using CS6. You might have a different version. You might even be using a different image editor, but this is the one I'm going to use for the demo. It's the most standard industry raster graphic tool that there is, and so that's what I'll be using for my demonstrations. So I could go to File, and then I could say Open, but real quickly I'm just going to show you that on my desktop I have created a folder here called JetSetter, and I'm going to open it up for you and show you what the contents are. And all I've done so far is I've made a folder inside of that called Images, and inside of that I've got 3 things already downloaded. So you can either download the copy of this to do the demonstration along with me, or you can go ahead and do your own pictures with your own settings. And I want to show you that the purpose of having this folder called JetSetter, you can call it whatever you want, is that it's going to be the root level of our web folder. So whenever we put this entire folder, JetSetter, or whatever you want to call it, up on the web, that's going to be the root level directory that all of the files and images and CSS and all of that stuff, it's going to refer to that root level as its home or as its root. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open that JetSetter picture, or excuse me, I should say the picture of the wing. So I'm going to open that, and I had put it on my desktop in the JetSetter folder and inside of Images, and the name of the file that I wanted to open is wing.jpg, and it was a JPEG when I downloaded it from Morguefile, but this is it. And I want you to notice something. If you are unaccustomed to using Photoshop, I want you to notice that this is not 100% of the actual file size. If you look down here in the bottom left corner, this is only showing it at 12.5% of its actual size. So if you were to go to Image and then Image Size, you would see here under Pixel Dimensions that in fact it is a width of 2,832 pixels by 4,256 pixels, and it's at a resolution of 300, which means that it's enormous. Okay, so first thing is first, let's get this into a web graphic form. This is much too high of a resolution for web graphics. It only needs to be 72 pixels per inch. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to show you another place that you can do that. However, I'm going to go ahead and leave the graphic the same dimension and width and height because there's always the possibility that someone's going to be looking at this on a huge monitor. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. And what I'm going to show you how to do is how to look at this file. First of all, just by zooming it in, you can do that so you can see the actual quality. What I did was I went down here and I grabbed this magnifying tool, and I'm zooming in. You can still see down here that finally I got to 100%, but I was not at 100%, and you can scroll around and you can look at the way that the image looks at 100%. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to say Save for Web. Okay, and because this is going to be the background image for the entire viewport, the entire page, all of the HTML, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it only as a JPEG. I'm not going to necessarily save it out as a PNG or something like that. There's no need to do that. Whenever you do save for web, it will automatically change the resolution for you from 300, let's say if it's 300 or 250 or 150 or whatever, no matter what the resolution is, it will automatically put the resolution at 72 pixels per inch, because that is the standard common denominator for web graphics. Now up here you'll see that you've got the original. That's the way that the original image looks at 100%. You have optimize, which gives you only one optimized view. If you do 2 up, it'll show you here on the left, it shows you original, and on the right it shows you a JPEG version. If I do 4 up, it's going to take a second, but it's going to render out some different options. Here I'm looking in the top left at original, on the right, top right is JPEG, and down on these others are different JPEGs, but you'll see that we're looking at a JPEG up the top right of 70% quality, and then the bottom left is 35% quality, and then the bottom right is 17% quality. And we always want to look at this at 100%, and you can click and drag as long as you've got this hand tool selected. Click and drag around to the places that are actually going to make a lot more difference for the quality. And it's important that you really pay attention to that, because even in the sky here, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it very well on the video, but this sky looks nice and seamless. Down below, you can see how pixelated it looks, where the sky starts to break up into different values, and that's something we wouldn't want. You can kind of see it here too. You can sort of see the stacked levels of color. And anyway, and so then once you start getting to more detail, you can really see what are called the artifacts here in the wing. This looks really bad, whereas the one up here looks just fine. It looks very similar to the original quality. Even at 35% quality, you know, you can see the wing without too many artifacts. And you would want to look at a lot of these things really clearly, and you want to make sure this is where you would look at it at 100% or smaller or something like that. But I want to make sure that I'm looking at 100%. And so definitely 35 is out. Even though it's a much smaller file size, I don't care, it's out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to somewhere in between 70 and 35. So let's say maybe, let's try about 50 and see what happens whenever I change it to be 50. And you can see automatically that the quality got better. The file size is quite significantly higher at 661K over the 393K of the 35% quality. But let's take a look and see how much it would be worth it to lose the quality for a smaller file size, or the reverse of that, you know, have a large file size for better quality. So what we've got up here is 70%, and let's drag it around a little bit more into different places. And I'm comparing as I drag to the 70% and the 50% and the 35, and they're not really all that noticeably different. And the other thing to remember is that most likely this large image is never going to be this big. It's a lot of times going to be on a smaller dimension than, you know, 2800 pixels wide. It's going to usually be somewhere a bit smaller, maybe somewhere around 2000 pixels at the most for most large monitors. So, you know, in that case, it's actually going to compress the image size so that the quality actually looks better. So, you know, that's something to remember too. And we might be okay at a lower quality, like around the 35 range. And what I'm going to do is, I think 70 is too high, because that's a pretty big file size, 1.5 almost megabytes for a background image. So on this one, I'm going to select this one, and you see how it gets blue around it? That means it's selected, and I'm going to go over here where it says quality, and I'm going to, instead of 35, let's see what happens at 40% quality. And it is not necessarily noticeably different between it and the 35%. So let's see at 45% if it makes a difference between it and 50. And if it does, then maybe we would want to go with even a smaller file size. All right, so it looks like it's maybe a little bit better than 35% quality. And the other place that's going to be really important is to look up in the sky to see if we lose a lot of quality where it goes into steps. Okay, and so far it's looking okay. Where I see it breaking down a lot in 35, I'm not seeing it break down too badly in the 45, and I'm not seeing it break down at all in the 50. So these are the kinds of things that I want to drag around and make sure that they're all going to be okay. And in the clouds, it's not as big of a deal typically. It's where you've got large expanses of gradient. Okay, large expanses of gradient would be like where it goes from one blue to the next. And I'm seeing it break down not too badly here. And 50 is a lot better. 35 is actually still not very good. And so I might decide that I could get away with it, you know, for the difference. But you know what? I think I'm going to just take a chance on the 50% quality and the file size, because this is looking consistently pretty good throughout the entire image. So I'm going to make sure that I have the 50% quality one selected. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit save. And this is, before I hit save, I want to just show you, if you decided that you didn't want the image size to be quite this large, this is where you could go ahead and make the modification of the actual dimension. So if you wanted to change it to 2000 wide, it would automatically adjust the height for you proportionally, because it's got this link on. Okay, and you're going to let it stay at 100% and go ahead and just use the bicubic smoother for the resampler. Okay, and if you really wanted to take the time before you move on, you could go to one of these, like let's say this one, and let's just see what it would be at PNG 24. And you'll see that because it doesn't have compression, that the file size is going to be significantly different, most likely, than the standard JPEG. And in fact, what it's doing is it's kind of flipping out on me. It's kind of getting stuck. Okay, and there it goes. So you can see, like, it's not compressed at all. It looks beautiful. However, it wants to make it 11.46 megabytes. Ridiculously huge. So we're going to go back to the one that's the JPEG compression at 661K, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And where I'm going to save it is inside of the images, except I don't want to overwrite my old Wing JPEG. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call it Wing 2. Okay. All right. And what's interesting now that you want to notice is, see, there's a little asterisk up here, and it says that it's a wing.jpg. Well, this is not wing2 JPEG, it's wing.jpg, so it's still the original, and the asterisk means that it's unsaved. So this is the original one. If I go back up to image size, you'll see that it's the one that's got the 300 resolution. I don't like to get rid of my original images, and I don't like to save them down so that I throw the data away. So whenever I go to close this original wing.jpg, it's going to ask me, do you want to save the changes? And I'm going to say no, I don't want to save them, because I already saved out a copy for the web, and I called it wing2.jpg. And so that's the one that I really want to use. Okay, so I'm going to end the demo here on how to save your files out for optimizing for JPEG, and then in the next one I'm going to show you some tricks on how to make transparent PNGs.